Which backup 49er running back should you be rostering right now? Is one stud first-round FFPC pick about to have a precipitous dive in production? And who rights his ship this week? Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson? Or neither or both? Plus, the Footballguys Players Championship Week 4 second-place team owner Steve Tansowny drops by to talk about drafting proven players coming off bad years, who he likes best in the Denver backfield, and much more. We've got a great show for you. Farrell Elliott is here. I'm Eric Balkman. Stick around. Your high-stakes fantasy football hour starts now.
Stand the pressure. I've seen greater men than need a lesson.
Broadcast live and heard around the world, you are now watching the most entertaining hour of radio on the planet. Welcome to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by MyFFPC.com with your hosts Eric Balkman and Farrell Elliott. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour is your home for analysis from the best players in the world. And now, because no one else was available, here are Eric Balkman and Farrell Elliott.
Solace in the scripture. Are we not all our father's sons? I became a man. Nobody ever told me what a man was.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you so much. And greetings and salutations to all the Balkaholics and Farrelliacs. Welcome to the latest episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by MyFFPC.com. I am, of course, your slightly above average host, Eric Balkman. My co-host is indeed the definitive commissioner of fantasy football, Farrell Elliott. Coming up on tonight's show, we're going to discuss whether Garrett Wilson is going to destroy that Packers suddenly vulnerable secondary, what kind of performance we'll see from J.K. Dobbins against the New York Giants, and then Steve Tansowny, the Week 4 second-place team owner in the Footballguys Players Championship. We'll talk about what he saw from Brian Robinson both last week and then Thursday night against the Chicago Bears. And we'll talk a little bit about with him what the proper Seahawks, which is the proper Seahawks tight end to be rostering and starting this week in a potential Week 6 shootout against the Arizona Cardinals in the NFC West and much more. If you want to connect with us on Twitter, do so. Show is at HSFF Hour. I am at Eric Balkman. You can check out Farrell's Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship at KFFSC.com. You can post on our Facebook page too, facebook.com/HSFF Hour. You can email the show, as many of you do on a weekly basis, highstakesfantasyfootball@gmail.com. If you have any questions for us, now is the time to send them in. We'll try to get to all the chat room questions, all the tweets, all the emails in the fantasy feedback segment coming up later on in the show. Thanks to our audio engineer, my best friend Bryce, and our producer and mutual friend Rob. Play the FFPC Weekly Challenge Week 6. Reminder, there is no draft, no salary cap. You choose the 10 or 12 players that you want by Sunday's kickoff. We've got the slim format with 10 players, no kickers or defenses. We have the 12-player format with kickers and defenses. Only one player per NFL team. You can play for $35. You can play for $200. You can enter the 30-team contest, the 100-team contest. And reminder, there is also a $200 entry one where it is only 10 players. The winner takes all being a 2023 FFPC main event entry. So for just $200, you can get your way into next year's main event and play for $1 million. Did a great interview with Christian Barney Newkirk, a 5-time FFPC league champ, on the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown on Tuesday night. You can check that out at rotoviz.com/podcast, or of course, anywhere you get your podcasts, or you can watch the replay on the FFPC YouTube channel as well. Remember to like, subscribe, comment, share, and get notified. A guy I always comment on, I always like, I always share his knowledge, and I'm always notified every single time he's bringing the real, which he's going to do tonight, ladies and gentlemen. The definitive commissioner of fantasy football, Farrell Elliott. Welcome aboard, sir.
Hey, buddy, it's good to see you. You know, I appreciate that introduction, but quite frankly, if we don't do any better than I did last week, I'll actually have to come with a security detail to the draft in Las Vegas. You know, we gave Trevor Lawrence in front of the Rams quarterback Stafford, I believe, and that was a poor choice. The Packers lost. We gave A.J. Dillon, at least I did. Balky, you had it right. I had it wrong. I gave Dillon, a player that I said was going to get all kinds of carries. He should have in the second half. 6 carries for Dillon, despite the fact he averaged over 5 yards a carry. I hope you can tell us what's going on with your Packers, my friend.
You know, what's funny is, as most of our viewers know, I host a local radio show in Northeast Wisconsin. I'll be honest with you, we've had a ton of guests on that show this week, and nobody seems to know what the hell is going on. You know, there was one possession that the Packers had in the second half. It was right after the Giants had driven down the field, and the Packers came on after, you know, their defense desperately needed a rest. They bombed it 3 straight times down the field, 3 and out, and then the Giants really took control after that.
That was
And
difficult to watch.
I was so disgusted with it. I watched Matt LaFleur's explanation of it, and it makes sense in my head on paper, but man, so frustrating that they were really. And think about that last drive of the game too. What were they doing well? They were doing stuff that they got away from early in the game. You know, earlier in the game, it was Romeo Doubs and Alan Lazard and Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon, and they're all living in the first 10 yards past the line of scrimmage, and things were good. Yeah, that wasn't spectacular, but they're churning up plays and making some headway. They get 20 points in the first half, and then they really don't go back to that type of offense till that final drive of the game where they ended up getting stuffed inside the 5-yard line.
Right.
But that I think it's what Tom Brady has done most of his career. If you can just keep moving the chains, you don't have to make these big plays all the time. And hopefully that's what we see. Well, we'll get into some Packers Jets analysis tonight, because I think that's going to be an important game to break down. Without further ado, let's get into the fantasy flash. Kyle Pitts was limited in practice on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday this week. Now, here's the thing with Kyle Pitts. I don't know why his coach, a former tight ends coach, is refusing to use him as anything more than a decoy and a blocker. I don't get that. I don't get that they are losing football games and they're not utilizing Kyle Pitts. I know it is a bad matchup this week with the San Francisco 49ers, and I know Kyle Pitts is dinged up. I said, again, on one of my other shows, I said my stud of the year is going to be Kyle Pitts. And I could not have been more wrong 5 weeks in. Farrell, I don't know about you, but I am definitely willing to sit him down this week and play other options. Something I would never recommend anybody doing with their second round pick, who is, you know, going to be active. But man, I'm kind of run out of excuses with Kyle Pitts. We're 5 weeks in. You can't keep trotting him out there anymore.
Yeah, you do so at your demise. Now, Bulky, you and Kyle Pitts have ruined more fantasy football dreams than I have, so I feel a bit better about it. You know, yeah, through 5 games, 10 receptions. Through the same 5 games last year, 24 receptions. And if I think back, even then, people had such high expectations for Pitts that they thought that the 24 receptions through 5 weeks was underperformance. He had 9 against the Jets in week 5 and caught his only touchdown pass. But that's last year. Let's focus on this year. We've got a team that, you know, this is where fantasy football and real football collide, and sometimes you get people to say the wrong thing. And my good friend Bob Hogan pointed out something very interesting to me, which I was able to pass on to a fantasy player. He says, these coaches in Atlanta don't know what they're doing. Well, they haven't won a lot yet, and they're playing with a roster that's got plenty of holes in it. But, you know, if we seek any guidance from Las Vegas, the first 4 games that the Falcons played in, all as underdogs, they covered the spread in all 4 of them, which generally means, pointed out to me by Hogan, that the coaches are getting a little more out of their players than you would suspect. And we take back, where did these coaches come from? Well, they came from Tennessee, a place where it is noted a tight end underperformance. And if Pitts doesn't play this year, or this weekend rather, he's going to be substituted by what they see, what they've always played as their tight end, a guy that looks more like an H-back, 6'2", 245, 250 pounds, and that's Fursker. Eventually, we're going to find out more about this, and we're going to have to find a different role. Pitts lining up off the line somewhere in this team to make a difference. And perhaps if there's a quarterback change, we'll see an elevated level of participation for Pitts.
Yeah, Kyle Pitts has caught 3 or more balls just once so far this season. That's been frustrating to see. And I got him in a couple leagues. I want him to right the ship, but at this point, I've heavily tempered my expectations.
You mentioned playing other options. If you drafted Pitts, you drafted it gung-ho. Everybody that got him at the draft and people that didn't get him say, oh, I can't get Pitts anywhere. And people that didn't get him lamented that. But if you have him at the draft, your other options, especially based on the tight end play that we've had, they're not very good.
Yeah.
And so we've got to make hay with that position in the FFPC. Perhaps you'll be saved a decision by the fact that he may not be active. Man, hard for the owners if he is active, but is on a snap count or plays even a lesser role on the field. Wow,
yeah,
that'd be tough.
It would be tough. It would be extremely tough. He is actually playing against the San Francisco 49ers this week, and that's the next team I want to talk about here because Tyrion Davis-Price was actually listed as a full participant this week in practice. He had been missing games, several games. But if you think back to the last game he played in week 2, he had 14 carries that game. Mm-hmm. Now, because nothing can be easy in fantasy football, Farrell, Kyle Shanahan, alleged illegitimate child, I'm not sure, Tevin Coleman joined the roster this week. He gets 8 carries, 23 yards, and a touchdown. He catches all 3 of his targets for 44 yards and a touchdown. These guys seem to be joined at the hip. So just when you think, okay, TDP is going to be the guy, no, Tevin Coleman once again re-enters the Kyle Shanahan picture. And if you only have the room to roster one of these guys, what are you doing? Are we putting our chips on Tevin Coleman after what we saw last week? Or are we going to roll with TDP, a guy who was a pretty popular mid-round draft choice back in August and September?
You're talking about as a backup running back?
As the backup to Jeff Wilson, yes.
You're trying to get a backup into your – well, neither one of these players –
Not necessarily, I beg your pardon, not to start this week, but to keep on your roster in case something would happen to Jeff Wilson, which stuff has happened to him over the course of his career.
Oh, okay. That's I understand the question now. Okay, so, well, with Tevin Coleman, he left San Francisco to go with another San Francisco coach to go to the Jets, and we know how all that worked out. But he is a beloved player within that organization, coaching staff and front office. As that coaching tree expands through the league, Tevin Coleman may be able to play forever. But he walks into there and veteran running back, which knows how to hit the holes. And who were the 49ers playing when Coleman put up those numbers?
Carolina.
Yeah, the 27th rushing defense in all of the NFL, who happened to be without my favorite linebacker, Jeremy Chin, that week. So, Coleman had a good opportunity. Terry, Price is a comer at the position. Everyone was excited about him. He's got the resume from the SEC, but he ran in his only game against the worst rushing defense, 14 carries, 33 yards. Everyone would say, well, what about Wilson? Let's think about Wilson a minute. There's 3 guys in the league that have the volume that have more yards per carry than Wilson. Wilson is 4th, which I love yards per carry. That's my favorite stat for a running back. The guys in front of him is your fellow Chubb. Barclay is number 2. And by down, they might be on bye week, Balky, but I found a way to get the Raiders in the conversation. Josh Jacobs, number 3, running back yards per carry. But those are the 3 guys that are in front of Wilson. So Wilson is a top performer. If you drafted him late and have him available now for your team, he's going to keep all these guys off the field, maybe even Elijah when he comes back.
Yeah, and that is going to be a conversation that's going to be a fun one to have.
Yeah.
Once Elijah Mitchell's healthy, if Wilson is still running as hot as he is, what's going to happen then? That is something we'll have a conversation with down the road for sure, and that'll be a very compelling thing. The news out of Pittsburgh this week, I think, was interesting. Steelers coach Mike Tomlin in his press conference telling the reporters there that, quote, we've been playing Jalen more and will continue to do so, as that is not what you want to hear if you have Najee Harris on your high-stakes teams. Going back to the game this past week, yes, it was a blowout to Buffalo, and I'm sure that played a little bit of a role into this. But Jalen Warren played 51% of the snaps against the Bills. He caught 4 passes for 39 yards, had 5 carries, he gets 24 yards. So you're looking at over 60 yards. Najee Harris, again, I want to emphasize it was a blowout, but Harris was out-snapped, out-targeted, and out-rushed by Jalen Warren. And this is a guy who is going in the first round of FFPC and KFFSC drafts, quite frankly. Maybe early second round in KFFSC, maybe early second round in FFPC too. But Jalen Warren, even if he's not getting half the snaps out there going forward, but let's say he's getting 25 or 30% of the snaps, Farrell, this is not good for Najee Harris. But I think if you have Harris on your team, you can't help but just keep trotting him out there and hoping for the best.
The kind of volume that he had last year was not sustainable.
Otherworldly. It was fictional.
What was the game? He had 19 targets or 19 catches or something like that, 14 catches. It was nonsensical. So he can have production in a year when running back production is not necessarily the easiest thing to find. He can have production in a lesser role, and some bit of that role being a lesser role might be more valuable to him. I'm not ready to give up on Najee Harris yet. It will be a real matchup this week will give us a better idea of what we can have with this going forward. One very good game in a blowout did not necessarily make a difference in the way this team's going to line up. However, Warren did look good, crisp. He's a good cutback runner. I like the way he catches the ball. There's a lot of things to like about him, and I tip my cap to everyone that got on him late and drafted him, because if you kept him on your roster, you've got an option moving forward. Because Pittsburgh, especially with Freiermuth, I believe Balky has already been declared out. I could be wrong. It may be questionable.
No, he has been. He is out.
But, if he's not available, they're going to have someone that can catch and run the ball from around the middle of the field and the backfield. So, yeah, let's see what happens.
We will see what happens. We're also going to see what happens for the Dolphins this week. Skylar Thompson getting the start in Week 6 against the Vikings. Number one, before we get into the Thompson thing, can you shed some light on this? I think I know the answer, but I want you to confirm. The reports out of Miami was that if Bridgewater can pass concussion protocol, he would be expected to not start this game, but be the backup to Thompson. And I was kind of thinking to myself, if Bridgewater passes concussion protocol, the doctors are saying he's good to go. Why wouldn't the Dolphins start him? Now, is it simply because Thompson is getting all the reps and practicing during the week? Is that the reason why Bridgewater would just be a backup?
It could be, but Skylar Thompson, the team likes Skylar Thompson. Scouting staff really likes Skylar Thompson. In the draft, they almost waited too long, and there were a lot of calls coming in for this player. We would like him here. We did, and finally they had to draft him because he wasn't going to be available to them in free agency. And our little blurb there from Twitter seems to depreciate Skylar Thompson. I remember a guy that threw for 3 touchdowns versus LSU, completed 75% of his passes, and earned the NFL interest. I like his career. He's got the best thing. He needs his boys to subscribe to HBO, help a brother out. He's got the guys to help a brother out. He's got Waddle. He's got Hill. He's got Mostert. If we're going to talk about old running backs, let's talk about Mostert. He's got guys around him that can make a difference. I really like, he's going up against a team that is in the bottom third in pass defense. And, that includes games that they've played, that the Vikings have played against the Bears and the Saints featuring the Red Rifle. So all in all, I wish that for a team that I needed a quarterback on and needed it hurriedly and had to make a waiver wire acquisition, that I had thought more about Skylar Thompson and less about Carson Wentz.
Let me ask you this. Would you be doing, if you had Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, or Raheem Mostert, would you be doing anything differently with them? In other words, would you be sitting them? Are you sitting them this week because of Skylar Thompson, but you would start them with Bridgewater? Or are you doing the same thing regardless of who?
I'm more inclined to want to start those players with the rookie quarterback because and this is probably the better answer, the football answer to your question. We love Teddy Bridgewater. We've established that for years and years. Teddy Bridgewater is a backup quarterback for a reason. And I think at this point in his career, I'm not sure he has the arm talent to play the position. and to really make a difference at the position. He can manage a game. He can run the team. This kid Thompson has strength in the arm, and that's what these receivers need, because they'll create separation. They want the ball to them in a timely way down the field and all over the field. Thompson gives them the best chance to win while Tua is not available.
Well, and that makes perfect sense to me. And I would be honest with you, I probably only have Waddle or Hill in a couple of spots. I have Mostert in more than a few, but all of them I'm starting regardless of Bridgewater or Thompson. And now I feel actually a little bit better starting those guys, knowing that Skylar Thompson is the quarterback after hearing from the commish. Let's hear from tonight's guest, ladies and gentlemen. I'll bring him in right now. A 26-year veteran of fantasy football. He's in the midst of his 9th year in the Ffpc. He's already got 3 Footballguys Players Championship titles under his belt. One of his squads, not this week, but last week, was 2nd place overall amongst almost 15,000 other teams in the Footballguys Players Championship. You follow him on Twitter at Steve_Tansowny. Please welcome into the broadcast, Mr. Steve Tansowny. Steve, welcome in. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, Steve.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Nobody usually wants to hear my opinion.
Well, here's what I want. Now, here's the thing I want your opinion on right away. Now, you're a Steelers fan, but you got the opportunity to go to Buffalo to watch your Steelers play this past week. And certainly it was not the outcome you were hoping for. But can you tell everybody about the experience of, especially me, who's never gone to a game in Buffalo before, about partying with the Bills Mafia, sitting in the midst of the Bills Mafia? What was that experience like?
Well, it was unreal. I mean, I've been to about 10 different stadiums across the NFL. They started the earliest out of any tailgate that I've been to. They were friendly. I mean, I caught the odd cat call. Now, the good news is the Steelers travel fairly well. So there's some black and gold around. And I got introduced to the Octobomb. You know what that is?
Yeah, yes, I do. I am familiar with that. That I do.
So I was introduced to the Octobomb for the first time. So I had a beverage with 6 other Buffalo fans and 1 other Steeler fan. So it was an amazing time, beautiful day. It was a great. Other than the score. Although I got to, there was not as much animosity in the crowd because they were all happy, and I just was there for the ride. Got to see Pickett's first start. I guess that was the benefit. I can always say that.
And when Pickett is a multiple Super Bowl winner for your Pittsburgh Steelers, you can always say, I was there for his very first start.
Right.
Steve, when you are not taking in Steelers games across the country, when you're not floating around the top of the leaderboard in the Footballguys Players Championship, can you tell the viewers what you're doing for a living?
Sure. Yeah, I'm an account executive sales leader with a multinational technology company. I'm not sure I'm allowed to say the name, so I'll just say that Eli Manning did a fantasy football commercial with him. If you need some help on your lineup, Eli did. Now, that being said, Eli's in probably most companies' commercials right now, so maybe that's not that big of a deal. But
it narrows it down, but I don't think we can pinpoint it yet. So I think that's the best way to express that.
Narrow this down to me. You got a team in the top 40 in a Football Players Championship, Footballguys Players Championship. I always am fascinated by all those numbers of teams to be up that high, to be in that position. And oddly enough, you started this team. This was a 0 running back team. You started with no running backs through the 7th round. I assume you had a couple tight ends mixed in, and the rest were wide receivers, or were they all? What was before you got to running back? What was it?
Yeah, so I had, Cooper Kupp fell to me at 4. I happened to be number 4, so I was excited with Kupp falling to me.
Okay.
And then on the way back, I had a decision to make between basically Lenny or Hill. And I liked the upside of Hill, so all right. So now I'm full into 0 RB. So then I had 2 other strategies coming into the drafts that I had. One was I wanted to have one of the top 4 tight ends. So Darren Waller was the only one left in that group. So okay, he gets picked. So now I'm 2 wide receivers and a tight end in. And then I had one other rule for myself, is that I needed to have one of my top 6 quarterbacks. And so I was kind of watching, and I started to see Herbert, Mahomes, Allen drop. I'm like, okay, I need to get on Lamar here, which traditionally in my traditional drafts, I would have waited for QB till probably, 8, 9, even 10th round.
Right.
And in this case, I'm like, you know what? I just think what's changed in the last couple of years is that quarterback has got more separation from that top tier because of running as well as their running in touchdowns. And then, and running back has just become a little more of a roll the dice. So if you're not getting one of, like, I literally had in my plan, if McCaffrey or Taylor were left, maybe, okay, then I might take him at 4.
Okay.
Otherwise it was like I just got to put my draft capital into a little more sure things.
You were zigging and zagging in the right way, and it does my heart good to know that when you finally got to draft a running back, that a Steelers fan like yourself could lean on the second Raider when you took Josh Jacobs, and how fantastic this was to have Josh Jacobs sitting there for you in the 7th round.
Yeah.
So my question is quickly, and you can comment on anything else you want about this team. You've got to be thrilled with what you see about the way Jacobs running. Do you think he keeps it up in some type of similar performance better than what we've seen from Josh Jacobs in the last couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, I have to, I got to bring it back to the Steelers. So he reminds me of Bell. The year that he was in a contract year, it was all about the Steelers ran the heck out of him. Well, the Raiders are going to run the heck out of Josh Jacobs. I know they had made some drafted White, I believe, behind. There was some pressure, but he was a clear cut. My rules are, I'm looking for a clear cut guy's going to carry the rock, and he was. And then in the draft itself, I started to see that next tier of running back started to go, and I'm like, okay, I got to make it. I can't wait any longer. And you know what? You do some mock drafts, knowing what the average ADP was on them. This just was had to take it at this time.
Steve, I think one of the great things about this draft, the way it's fallen for you. I mean, we talked about the first few rounds where you get Waller, you get Lamar Jackson, all these great receivers, Amon-Ra St. Brown, obviously among them. But, I look at what you did with not only Jacobs, but Miles Sanders, getting him at the 904 too. These were two players that were coming off down years. And one of the things I always like doing, it's more of a fantasy baseball thing for me than football, but I have applied it in football too, is drafting proven players coming off bad years, because you usually get a discount in drafts on them. Historically, has that been your experience as well, where you're kind of, you're not going to overdraft these guys, but you're plucking them maybe a little bit early because the draft value is so depressed on them? Because you got great deals on Jacobs and Sanders, man, and they're crushing it right now.
Yeah, I mean, I also look at it's very important to understand the team. Like and strength of schedule. I mean, I looked at Philadelphia strength of schedule. I mean, they're going to win. Obviously they're 5-0. I mean, they're a great team. And then I discount injuries. I think a lot of guys will. Like if McCaffrey would have been available for me, I would have taken him. I know he's been injury plagued, but to me, injuries are random. I mean, they're more random. And so I think a lot of players will overvalue injury history. I mean, even remember Will Fuller last year, until he got into trouble, he didn't get hurt, right? He went through, but everybody was talking about injury. So I think that's what I looked for, a good team. And then you'll notice is the only handcuff I took was I did take Kenneth Gainwell not long after, because I believed in the team. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to make a bet on the team. And I was trying to get Boston Scott at some stage, but I didn't get him. He got plucked on me. But that was kind of my style from a running back perspective.
We got an interesting game coming up here Monday night. Denver, we've seen very little that they've done right. They managed to win a couple games, but when you talk about injuries, that's what it looks like with the quarterback. And now we're hearing things, and we're understanding things about Russell Wilson, that his body may be compromised and what he's doing. He sure looks odd when he starts throwing the ball sideways and underneath and short patterns. Now, I have looked at this backfield. I was deep into Williams, but I always got Gordon, and I'm grateful for that. And I have a team that's looking way up from the Football Guys Players Championship at your 40th place team. And I have Gordon and Murray on that roster. I never thought about rostering Mike Boone, and I was glad to see him play so well. I've always thought of Mike Boone as a special teams player. You drafted Mike Boone, I do believe, or perhaps you picked him up on waivers. Whatever happens in this game, I think that this backfield is going to be leaned on very heavily to catch balls and to try to move the proverbial chains down the field and keep the Chargers off the field. What's your belief in the mix of the Denver running backs, and how far in is there an opportunity where you think you're ever going to give Boone his chance?
Yeah, so I mean, I did pick up Mike Boone. I didn't draft him, but I call him he's on team preseason. Like, he always seemed to have that preseason. You play a little DFS and you'd end up with Mike Boone on one of your squads. There's a reason why Murray's been on practice squads all year. I mean, so I don't really believe in him. Do I think he's going to potentially vulture some TDs? Yes. And Gordon scares me. When you're fumbling the ball 4 weeks in a row, and a coach is looking over his shoulder whether he's still going to have a job, I'm not sure the next fumble doesn't keep you out of the lineup. So am I playing him this week? Probably not. Am I on a trigger figure? Because I do think he's the next backup. He's decent out of the backfield. He gets some targets, and I'm waiting for Gordon to fumble that next ball, and then like I said, when a coach is starting to worry about his job, they just get trigger figure happy. Like, they will make decisions because they're worried about the next game. So that's kind of my thought process. It's convoluted, but that's my thought process.
No, I think I followed it pretty well, but I'm going to advise you not to live in fear on old Latavius Murray, because you know what? That little audition he gave over in London shows that he's primetime ready. And Gordon, well, Melvin's an interesting cat, and I think Balky and I carry the ball just like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, just like this from now on. That's how.
Yeah, you got to two-hand that.
We're all two-handing the ball.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of other running back situations, let's get to the post that we just got from Coco's World on YouTube here. The Cam Akers news. Really bizarre stuff today coming out, and I'll throw this right now to you, Steve. First, we found out that Cam Akers is already out this week. Sean McVay did not want to comment on his role with the team going forward. So certainly it looks like Darrell Henderson this week, and maybe Darrell Henderson for the foreseeable future. I don't know what to make of it. And maybe you guys can comment on that. But right now I'm just focused from a fantasy standpoint. You think about Kyron Williams, and you think about Malcolm Brown, who are on this team as now the new backup running backs if Cam Akers is going to be done with the Los Angeles Rams. If that's the case, is there any interest in carrying these guys as the 19th or 20th player on your roster, Steve? And I'm speaking with Malcolm Brown and Kyron Williams.
Yeah, I mean, you can tell they aren't. McVay has never been a huge Henderson. I mean, he's a fan. I mean, he never really stuck with them, right? So that always makes a guy nervous. And Malcolm Brown has done solid when he's had the chance. And you're one injury away, and that's never a bad idea on a good offense once they get things going, and a quarterback that doesn't mind throwing to your back. And again, when I look at running backs, I look at targets. It's an important part of the floor when I'm looking at who I'm going to start. I mean, it also makes a difference on what week you're in, right? If you're playing, if we're talking playoff time and I need to hit a home run, maybe I'm not playing someone that's just got a good floor. I'm going to try maybe move towards a wide receiver instead of a running back in a flex position. But if you're trying to win just a week and get to that next, into the next week, into the next, into the playoffs or whatever you need, then you got to, pick up somebody like a Malcolm Brown, have him on your bench so that you can take advantage of the mistake or of an injury. Sorry.
Farrell, do you have any insight into what you think might be going on with Akers and the Rams?
Based on the coach's response, I think, we're very much interested in league and player safety, and mental health is part of the player safety. And this is an opportunity for the league and the players union has been way out in front of this to respond to it. I think that's what's going on here. My dad had an expression, an old school expression. He says, "Can't stand prosperity," and that's what I think of in this player's case. From a fantasy perspective, this opens the door for Henderson. Balky, you know what I think about Henderson.
Mm-hmm.
Steve, if you've listened to this show, I think Henderson's a better running back than a lot of guys that get more opportunities in the league, including those at Los Angeles. I really like Williams from what he did at Notre Dame. I saw him do it at a high level in college, and I wouldn't hesitate to put that player on the roster.
All right. Good analysis there, gentlemen. I want to shift it from running back to receivers right now. And a player that we talked about, I think, quite a bit during the pre-NFL draft season when we didn't know where Sky Moore was going to end up. There were certainly a lot of dynasty players that came on here, and we're very excited about him. And then when he got drafted, he became like the 107, 108 in a lot of drafts for Ffpc rookie drafts this year. So people expecting big things. And we haven't not yet seen it. I mean, it's not fair to him. It's only been 5 games into his NFL career. But, Steve, are we going to start seeing Patrick Mahomes start targeting Sky Moore more so than we've already seen? Or is this something that's simply not in the cards for the remainder of this year because of the presence of Smith-Schuster and Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Travis Kelce, and obviously Clyde Edwards-Helaire catching a lot of passes there as well?
Yeah, I mean, obviously barring injury, I mean, that changes everything. MVS can sometimes go a little sideways. But unfortunately, I think this is – I have a bunch of shares of him in a couple leagues. I'm keeping him probably longer than maybe most because, sometimes you get rookies that they get that rookie wall if they start at the beginning of the year, or if they get integrated slowly, all of a sudden they start to catch up and it becomes more natural. Before you know it, it's the end. So here comes FFPC playoffs. It's a guy that I would like to have in a really good offense. I may not be starting him until week 12 or 13, but I'm definitely not dumping him at this point in time.
Steve, back in the spring, back during free agency, we had an announcement, actually. I think they came to an agreement in principle, J.D. McKissic moving from Washington to Buffalo. And then Buffalo matched the deal, and he returned of his own volition to Washington. And Balky and I talked about it, and the player makes his own decision. Players don't necessarily fear the unknown, but they become comfortable. I think today, oh my goodness, what a great player it would be for Buffalo. And oh my goodness, what a ride in your career, a hardworking player, to get to the Super Bowl, and how great it would have been. And I would love J.D. McKissic in this offense. And now after Thursday night, when you look at that backfield from Washington, you have to be impressed with what Robinson did. Fantasy players have written off Gibson, but Gibson had the strongest fourth quarter that you could imagine. And McKissic, although shining on 1 or 2 receptions, seems to be the odd man out. Is that how you read it? And I'd like to know what your expectations are of Robinson. I'd like to go back to the idea that when we all heard the news, was he dumped off rosters and later picked up on waivers? And how much of him do you have? And what are you going to do with this team moving forward? You may give us a longer answer than what Coach Rivera did today.
Yes. Yeah, that was a pretty quick answer, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I have a little bit of Brian Robinson. I did keep him in the one league that I had him, and after the incident, he won the job in preseason. So it didn't surprise me that once he was healthy that he got the first chance. Rivera is that type of a coach. Like if I think of Cam Newton injuries, like he didn't lose his job because of it, right? Now going forward, to be honest with you, I played J.D. McKissic in a couple of leagues because I like I say, I have a tendency to stick on targets, and he had been traditionally getting targets. And if I was doing with my second flex role, a guy gets targets, that's who I'm going to have in the lineup. I don't think 1 week is a trend. For some reason, there's a hate on Antonio Gibson in that coaching room. So I still would rank him Robinson, McKissic, Gibson, But I mean, last night definitely threw a wrench into my thought process.
It's a thin line between love and hate. Those coaches seem to love that guy that can run with the ball and catch it. What a quarter he had, and man, McKissick in Buffalo.
Wow.
Oh yes,
Would have been tremendous. Would have been tremendous.
Quit teasing me on that, man. I would have loved seeing him last week.
Steve, one of the things I thought people were excited for, not necessarily excited for the Jahan Dotson injury, but when he went down, we saw De'Ami Brown step up last week and made 2 big plays, 2 touchdowns. And I think a lot of people were kind of excited. Maybe this guy's going to be a thing in Washington until Dotson gets back. And it sounds like it could be a few weeks before that happens. Last night, Curtis Samuel was basically non-existent. So you think, okay, De'Ami Brown, well, he had a 0. It was a bagel performance from De'Ami Brown. And I don't know how much stock we can put into this because Carson Wentz failed to throw for 100+ yards last night, which was shocking to me that he couldn't even top 100. Maybe I'm answering my own question here, but De'Ami Brown, is he a thing? Is he any kind of threat to be near your starting lineups until Jahan Dotson gets back?
Yeah, I mean, you answered it right off the bat. I said basically my opinion is Wentz is a bigger threat to Samuel's role than Brown is. But again, I'm a guy on volume, touches, less about efficiency. And De'Ami Brown it was all about efficiency. Those 2 long touchdowns. So in my opinion, I'm keeping Samuel around, Curtis around. I mean, and a long shot, keep the bottom of your bench, maybe, but I'm not buying. It's just too much. 2 catches, great game, but it's about consistency in my opinion.
Well, Curtis Samuel just had a very, very bad game. I don't think we should call him Stonehand Samuel, but that touchdown, there was 45 yards of touchdown right there for Carson Wentz.
It would have made his night. It would have given us a double.
It would have given us double digits for those foolish enough like myself to have started him. Let's go out to Seattle. You don't know these guys, Steve. If you ever come play in Kentucky, you'll meet them and you'll love them. Maybe you met them in Las Vegas. FPI, Petri and Larson. They walked into our Cincinnati draft, Balky. All they could talk about, especially to Fetch and Justin, all they could talk about was Geno Smith. They said, you got to get Geno Smith. You got to get Geno Smith. And, now there's a lot of players that are benefiting from Geno Smith's resurgent career, and I'm just loving it. But the tight end position, historically a head scratcher in Seattle, continues to be one. It's Disley, it's Fant, who I understand has had injury recoveries. And if you look at what Fant did at Denver, man, those numbers would be perhaps a league winner now this year. But then you can figure in Colby Parkinson, who's 6'7" and went to Stanford. And when I see a Stanford tight end, I say, hey, there's something there. You put all these 3 guys together, you got one very good fantasy player. But the rules don't let us do that. So you want to talk about this position, and is there one you like better than other? Is one going to emerge, or is it just going to continue to be too hard to figure out, tight ends in Seattle?
Well, it's going to be definitely difficult, but that's not, I'm allowed to have an opinion, so let's give you an opinion. I was on the Fant drafting late. I thought, yes, there'll be some time for adjustment, but, talent wins out, past history. I gave you my opinion on injuries already. So I was on Fant. In fact, I have him on this team basically to play this week when Waller was out. But if I had the chance to do it over again, or if I'm choosing right now, I'm picking Disley. And it's about red zone targets. At the end of the day, he's got slightly more red zone targets than Fant. And in the tight end position, if you're not one of the top 4, you got to get a touchdown, and you might as well roll the dice with the guy that's going to get more targets in the red zone.
He's getting them one essentially every week.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's been scoring them too. He's a good-handed tight end. I like that. That's great.
A couple of emails here, and then I want to get into a conversation that's starting to develop in the in the YouTube chat right now. But the first email, we're going to go back to Kansas City for this one. This is Jim in Alborn, Minnesota. Dear Steve, what kind of a role do you think Jerick McKinnon will have for the Chiefs going forward? Thanks so much. Thank you, Jim, for viewing and for sending in that email. And Jerick McKinnon last week had his best week of the season so far against the Las Vegas Raiders. 8 carries for 53 yards. He also caught a pair of passes for 19 yards as well. And, obviously you have Clyde Edwards-Helaire there, Isaiah Pacheco, kind of muddying things up. But with McKinnon, definitely worth a roster spot, right, Steve? But it's for me, it's difficult to know when to start him.
Yeah, I think that's a bye week challenge. Like if you need a bye week guy, I like McKinnon. I don't think he's giving up his third back role. He's going to get to carry the ball sometimes. It's a very efficient offense, and anytime you can bet on an efficient offense, it's a good thing. I think CEH is the one that kind of loses on the Pacheco piece because I think he's going to take CEH carries ahead of McKinnon carries. So I would say, my opinion is if you like him now and in your lineup, you need to have that kind of that type of a player that's going to get you a certain flat number of like with a certain floor. Then I think you can roll with him and then go from there. Like I think like I say, Pacheco is going to be digging into CEH his role more so than McKinnon's.
So right now in the chat room, and our resident Ivy League professor Hudson Kern-Reed brought this up about DJ Dallas as a potential deep sleeper this week. And if you missed the and not necessarily you guys, but if anybody who's viewing this missed the High Stakes Fantasy Football show on the Better Sports Network on Wednesday night, I had Howard Bender from Fantasy Alarm on. We were talking about this Cardinal Seahawks game. And he's like, Balky, I'm basically starting everybody in this Cardinal Seahawks game this week because it's going to be electric. Now you have a situation where the starting running back for the Cardinals is probably going to be Eno Benjamin, yet DJ Dallas could play a role for Seattle. Steve, can you kind of compare these two, what you think about their prospects this week, and maybe a little bit going forward too, now with the Rashad Penny injury, making DJ Dallas relevant as far as maybe being fantasy rosterable now?
I mean, he's relevant, but I mean, the Seahawks spent a lot of capital on Kenneth Walker. I mean, he's good. He was great in college. He's going to have a great week, and then it's just going to roll. So, and I mean, traditionally they, the Seahawks have been a single back, right? I mean, go all the way back to my Sandbox days and Sean Alexander I was running with, right? I mean, they, it's they like to run with their one back, and away they go. Now, again, if they continue. Maybe it's because I'm from Western Canada and I got lots of Seahawks fans around me, and it kind of ticks me off a little bit. So I'm not buying into this Geno Smith offense is going to lead the league for the whole year. Maybe that puts a little bit of a challenge on the DJ Dallas, but I don't think he's definitely a good stash. There's no doubt about it. I wouldn't roster him yet. I need to. If you show me 1 week, then you're definitely in the conversation. Until then. Unless it's even Eno Benjamin, right? We talk about Eno Benjamin. I have him he's going to be in my starting lineup in this team this week. I happened to draft him. He's now getting his chance. He's done well when he's gotten the chance. So yes, he's going to be a guy that I play. So I don't know if that helped him on that, but I definitely would have him rostered, and then you're just going to have to pick your spots.
Yeah, I think
your question came from Hudson Kern-Reeve.
It was him in Coco's World, which we're discussing the Dallas versus Benjamin.
Those are different levels of interest. If it wasn't DJ, if the guy's name was DJ Philadelphia, Hudson would have never brought up the question.
True.
It's all about Dallas.
It's a great point.
That is.
DD stands for Dallas. Okay, so the other thing too is let's do it like this. Let's go to Brian in Anaheim here. He has a question. He writes, hey, Steve, I need a Hail Mary this week with no Cooks, St. Brown, or Devontae Adams. Chase Claypool or Allen Robinson? Thank you, Brian, in Anaheim, for this email. So this is, it's not a great choice here.
Actually,
go ahead, Steve.
I was going to say, I mean, and this is not a Steeler thing. I go with Claypool over Robinson because the Rams are playing against his zone defense this week. And if you look back at all of your of the weeks when the Rams are playing zones, you got a ton of Cooper Kupp and you got a ton of Tyler Higbee. So in my opinion, You got to go with the guy that's going to get a few more targets. I think we all know that Tampa is a funnel defense. They'll shut down the run. So that means that, your Pickens and your Dante Johnson and Claypool are going to get they're going to end with Freiermuth out. It's going to be to those three. So, I mean, I would just, if I got to place a bet, I'm placing it on Claypool.
Farrell, I'm fresh out of emails for Steve. And I know you're loving the Claypool choice here from him.
I do. He's not starting on every team where he's rostered, which is damn near all of them, but not. That's an intriguing way to look at it. And I'm rooting for Claypool, and I'm rooting for you, Steve. And you're going to deliver an answer that's going to make everybody love the fact that you are on this show. And you might have already exposed some of them, so now you've got to dig deep. Somebody you haven't brought up yet. I need a bust for this week. And, you could probably listen to what's going to be what I'll advise after you leave the show, and you could pick one from there because I'll probably advise. Or a sleeper. Bust and sleeper this week. That's what our listeners need, and we need it from you.
Well, I hate to tell people, and again, this hurts my heart, but I just touched on it. The Steelers, Harris is getting fewer carries. You're playing against a Bucs defense that funnels to the pass. I know he was an early pick for you, but if you can find something different, I just think he's going to be in trouble this week. Unfortunately, that's my bust. From a sleeper, I kind of like what's going on with Rondale Moore this week. I mean, he's finally going to be in the slot. He's going to get used properly with AJ Green returning. So, obviously that's going to be a high scoring game. So I would like to see Rondale Moore. I don't know if that's deep enough for you, but I'd like to see.
That's good.
I think he's going to have a good week.
I think, and Farrell, Hudson's asking us, you and I, for some deep sleepers this week. And obviously you have 4 teams on bye. Public service announcement, get those Texans, get those Raiders, get those Lions, and who's the other team that's on bye this week? Texans, Raiders, Lions, and why is this escaping me? It's
Detroit.
Detroit. It's Detroit, Houston, Las Vegas.
There's the Lions still, yes.
Yes. But I got to look this up now. I can't believe I
can't either. This is fascinating. This is fascinating podcasting.
Right. It's terrible. It's terrible. Okay. But looking at deep sleepers, obviously Hudson brought up DJ Dallas as a potential one. It's Tennessee. Idiot. Tennessee's also on bye this week. I should have knew. I knew that. Why can't I remember it? So you have Hudson asking us about some potential deep sleepers, and I try to stay away from deep sleepers as far as my starting lineup goes. You may not have the opportunity to, but just a couple of running backs that I'd mentioned. If you would have asked me prior to the game last night, I would have said J.D. McKissick was obviously one of them. I know that helps nobody now. Jalen Warren is definitely an interesting one, and I think, Steve, we should ask you about Jalen Warren because we talked about earlier in the show that Mike Tomlin says he's going to be using Warren more. Is this going to turn into a timeshare in Pittsburgh, in your opinion?
No, but he's definitely earning his touches. But I tell you what, from a deep sleeper in the same game for all of us that maybe have some, this ridiculous tight end position, Zach Gentry. Once he came into the game in Buffalo, I noticed him. And if you need somebody in your like I honestly I've been thinking about throwing in a claim to play him instead of Fant, like with Waller being out. If you're talking about a sleeper that you can probably still pick up off the waiver wire, that might be an interesting one because that is going to be a pass-happy game.
I would also offer, in Coco's World pointed this out, Alec Pierce. I think Alec Pierce is a nice deep sleeper this week. I don't know how deep that is. I think
it's not deep, Coco. I think 20 rounds in the Ffpc.
I think he makes.
Should have been a single-digit pick, Balky.
I'll say Donovan Peoples-Jones. I think is interesting. He's still getting a lot of targets. I think he'd be an interesting one. And say what you will about the Rams offense, but Matthew Stafford's looked for Ben Skoranek quite a bit, so far this season, more so than Allen Robinson, by the way. And I think, again, if you're desperate, if you got multiple guys on bye, that would make a good choice right there. I think we made a great choice right here for our guest tonight, Steve Tansowny, the Week 4 Football Guys Players Championship second place team, still hovering in the top 40 in the FPC. Good luck to you the rest of the way, Steve. Rooting for you not only in this league, but in all your leagues this year. We will follow you on Twitter at Steve_Tansowny, and certainly appreciate you carving out some time on your busy Friday night, kicking off the weekend in style. I think you said Saturday night, Sunday morning is your big like fantasy lineup setting waivers, stuff like that, right?
Correct. Yeah. Although, you got to start on a Friday. I mean, I know we're Kentucky, so I got a bourbon waiting for me with a nice big ice cube to start my research for the rest of the research for the weekend. So it was a pleasure.
Well, thank you so much. We'll let you get to that bourbon. Don't be a stranger. We'll do this again sometime. Steve Tansowny, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Than you, Steve Tansowny at Steve_.
I like that guy.
On Twitter.
I got some sleepers, Bonky.
Go ahead, fire away, Farrell. I want to hear him.
Atlanta Falcon running back Avery Williams changed from a DB, played DB and kick returner at Boise State, now playing running back, scored a touchdown. Kyle Alton, tight end at Tampa, and Khalil Shakir woke up last week, so I'm too late for that one.
So let me ask you about Shakir, because McKenzie should be back this week. So does that put Shakir back to sleep?
It shouldn't. But they have just so much up there. You can't depend on it. But oh boy, that was my favorite draft pick for best ball was Shakir, and I was glad to see him have such a great week.
Yeah,
week.
absolutely.
Hey, Avery Williams could be a real thing. This is a guy who caught punts despite being a defensive player. He caught punts at Boise State for all those years, and kickoffs. And so, he can handle the ball and he can catch the ball. And he's, I see a New England Patriots style third down back in Williams. So, but we got other things to get to, but that's my deep sleeper.
I'll just point this out for I'm looking at the analytics right now. We just had our viewership spike in Idaho because for your deep sleepers, you just listed two Boise State players in there as well. So they're loving us in Idaho right now at Boise State. So thank you so much for that. Let's get to the fantasy feedback segment here. These are all start sets. We can go through them relatively quickly. Dwayne in Greenville, South Carolina. I keep picking the wrong guy every week. Can you guys just do it for me? Aaron Rodgers hosting the Jets or Russell Wilson on the road against the Chargers? Keep up the great work. That's Dwayne in Greenville, South Carolina. I'm going to go with my guy for the Packers here. I think if you watch that film last week, that game, you could see that they're not far off from really clicking. That second half, I think, was an aberration. I think Rodgers gets right this week. I think he puts up some pretty good numbers. I just don't know what to make of the Denver Broncos offense right now, Farrell.
Yeah, you've got to go Rodgers. The interesting stat that I saw, and it blew me away. RPO, which team has a quarterback with more offensive plays on a run-pass option? No one more than the Green Bay Packers. 28.4% of the snaps. That means to me that he is looking, rolling, trying to find receivers. That's why Randall Cobb is going to continue to be successful. He and Cobb will continue this, what they started last week. And, when he drops back, you can begin to look for Romeo Doubs, and it's going to come together. Yeah, Rodgers is what you want to do there.
No Christian Watson this week, too. So Cobb and Dobbs should both be pretty successful this week. Let's go to this is the Dobbins question, I think.
Oh, yeah. Merciful suffering Jesus.
We're going to go up to Homer, Alaska, which is where Rich is. Any advice on playing J.K. Dobbins in the Meadowlands or Travis Etienne in Indianapolis? Thank you, Rich. I'm going to go with, like Ron Rivera said, I'm going to go with the hot hand here. Etienne has been trending upwards, whereas James Robinson has been trending downwards. Not really sure what to expect with J.K. Dobbins. I know Justice Hill doesn't look like he's going to get back this week, so maybe you could make the case for Dobbins, but I like what Etienne's doing. I'm going to play him over J.K.
Yeah, but he asked about Dobbins first, which means he wants to play Dobbins. And, we talked a lot on this show about a player. We talked a lot about Dobbins, a player that through this season has amassed 100 yards rushing. He carries the ball about 10 times a game. He gets a couple of catches. They're playing the Giants. We already know that they're going to blitz. This is not a good matchup for this player. And even when he has a good matchup, he hasn't produced. Go with Etienne and hope for the continued ascension of that running back.
The next one here is a wide receiver question. We're going to get to Greg in Richardson, Texas. Garrett Wilson facing Balky's Packers or Brandon Ayuk for a juicy matchup in Atlanta. Thank you. That is Greg in Richardson, Texas. While I do agree that it is a pretty good matchup for Ayuk this week, Garrett Wilson leads the Jets in targets this year. He's already got 38 of them. He's had some pretty successful games. He plays primarily in the slot. It's going to be on Packers defensive coordinator Joe Barry to move Jair Alexander to play more slot this game, which I think he will. But I also think, and this is kind of goes with the Rodgers answer that I had, I think the Packers are going to have a pretty good game this week. And as a result, I think you're going to count on some Garrett Wilson garbage stuff in the third and fourth quarter. And I think he picks up quite a few catches this game. I'm looking at like a 6 to 8 catch game for Garrett Wilson. I don't know if I can count on that with Ayuk. I'm going to play Wilson.
That's a head scratcher, and I can understand your reasons for Wilson here, but the targets have dropped off, and the catches have dropped off since quarterback Wilson has come back, and quarterback Flacco has gone to the bench, and I'm trying to understand who Wilson wants to throw the ball to, and it appears he wants to throw the ball to whoever's open, which is a way to win football games, but not a way to be a great fantasy team. Ayuk, you and especially our pal Dave Turp, Turp was a little off his tits on this player this year. He's just, but quite, and I said this will be a 50 to 60 catch player with Lance. Now he's got a more accurate quarterback, we think, and he's still on place, on par to get 50 or 60 catches. But Ayuk could, this is a tough one. I'd like to return to this one next week because the Niners are at the Falcons and. Geez, so this is a tough one. I'm going to just go Ayuk just to be on the different side with you, Balky. But neither of these players are getting the attention from the quarterback that they deserve, and it's much more understandable why Ayuk isn't, and it's a bit of a head scratcher why Garrett Wilson is.
Let's go to the YouTube chat right now. Coco's World wants to know updates on Jameson Williams. Any chance he's a factor this season? To answer that question, I will say that the drumbeat all along in Detroit was after the Week 6 bye, we'd start to see Jameson Williams on the field more. I haven't heard anything to contradict that, so I would imagine that we'll start seeing him maybe practice a little bit, at least doing individual drills after this week. Is there a chance that he's a factor this season? Yeah, there's a non-zero chance of anything. And I'm going to try to hold on to him. I have him in like 2 or 3 leagues. I'm trying to hold on to him as long as I can because I think he could be a difference maker down the stretch.
Yeah.
But I understand that anybody who is just doesn't have the room for him anymore because there is a very real possibility that he spends his the rest of October and November getting up to speed. Remember, this is a guy who's basically missed everything. Preseason, training camp, mini camp, OTAs. He missed everything, and he's a rookie. So I'm tempering my expectations on him.
That's good.
Okay, perfect. So Farrell and I have one mind on that. Before we get to the last question, Hudson Reeve is we want to get him in here. He wants to know because of all the anxiety people have, and I think Steve was talking about this too. Like unless you have a top 3, a top 4 guy maybe at tight end, you really don't have a tight end because of how inconsistent that they've been this year. Tight end sleepers this week. He mentions Tunyon. Yeah, I think that's one. Obviously, Taysom Hill. I think at this point you got to get him in your lineup. I picked up Hunter Henry in a couple of Kentucky leagues this week. Leagues where I had Darren Waller on by. So we'll see what happens there. So I think he's interesting. But besides that, Farrell, I'm not. And you mentioned Cade Otton, so I'll go with Cade Otton as well. Yeah. But any other tight ends that you like this week, maybe a little bit off the beaten path?
Well, no, I don't like Tunyon. Tell Hudson Kern or even the other listeners that don't care for Tunyon, but just because of what we read in RPO, Tunyon is going to be released from the line much, much later in that situation. I don't like that. Your Hunter Henry pickup is a pretty good pickup, and that's you've got a young quarterback who's going to lean into the tight end. Now, what did a young quarterback do last week? They had a big win. He went to his number one receiver, Myers. Myers had a big game. And Hunter Henry had a contributing game as the tight end. And those were the rest of the receivers caught 3 passes for negligible yards. We can talk about Daniel Bellinger, Balky. There's another. You take Bellinger at New York now. and some of our greatest fantasy players are dialed into the Giants as their favorite team. My pal Jeff Joaquin, big Giant fan, and he knows more about that team than any other team in the NFL. We had the pleasure of watching them play a full game outside of the red zone this past week, and Bellinger was on the field all the time. He lines up in the backfield. He lines up in line. He lines up split out. And he was on the field enough to make me think that there's a high potential. And, he's only caught 10 balls this year, but the best for him is still to come. And Hunter Henry, I had said, at the draft, a guy asked me, he goes, you're going to draft Hunter Henry? I said, yeah, if I can get him as my second tight end. He goes, I don't like old tight ends. Hunter Henry is 27 years old, but Hunter Henry is different than a lot of players. He came into the league and did well right away. So we think he's been an old veteran. He's a veteran player, but he's a long way over the hill with Hunter Henry.
Absolutely. And I guess that leads into the final question, Farrell. And I thought I knew how you're going to answer this. Now I'm not so sure. Hey, Farrell and Balky, need a Football Guys flex from you. Daniel Bellinger versus Baltimore or Hunter Henry in Cleveland? Tom in Enterprise, Kansas. Thank you, Tom. I'm going with Henry. Are you still going with Henry over Bellinger?
This is an FFPC Football Guys player?
Yes, Football
I
Guys.
would like him to examine his lineup and see if there's a weak flex where he could play both these guys. Because, I think this is a time, if you've got these two tight ends on your roster, this is the time to put them out there and see what you can do. If you have a receiver that you're not, that's got question marks, say that he's a guy that's targeted and been targeted around 5 times, take them down. Get Bellinger and Henry elevated in your lineups this week, because we know what the Giants have in Baltimore, a team that has got some real holes in the secondary, and we know what the quarterback needs from his tight end there with New England. So I like double tight ends.
Double tight ends is what Farrell likes. I like talking with Farrell on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour each and every week. Farrell, appreciate you joining me again this week, and we will do this again, same time, same place next week, 10/9 Central. Thank you so much, buddy. Have a great weekend.
I'm going to try, Balky, and I hope we're right about some of this stuff. I got to work my way up to the RotoViz. So, this is important.
It's coming.
I get something correct here, because I'm not getting to any prime time if I don't start getting some of this stuff together.
We'll get you on RotoViz. We'll get you on BSN. You're going to be doing it all, Farrell. We'll put you through the Eric Balkman podcast car wash, and you're just going to do everything.
Hanging with Balky, there's nothing better in the fantasy football world.
Thank you so much, dude. We will talk with you again on Friday. Farrell Elliott, ladies and gentlemen, the definitive commissioner of fantasy football at kffsc.com is where you can check that out. And of course, at KFFSC official on Twitter. Thanks to Steve Tansowny, Farrell Elliott, the FFPC, Rob Bryce, and of course, each and every one of you. We are back next Friday at 10/9 Central. A triple threat of guests. We're going to kick off the show with the Wizard of Odds himself. CBS Sportsline sports analyst Kenny White will actually drop by for an interview. So we're going to talk with him. So, get any betting questions or anything like that. We'll get into that with Kenny to kick things off. And then we're going to have the Week 5 leaders in the Football Guys Players Championship. Mo Farunia and Nick Baji will be on the show next week at 10/9 Central. Watch the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown if you missed it. With Christian Barney Newkirk on the FFPC YouTube channel. And we'll be doing another High Stakes Lowdown. We're pretty much 10/9 Central on Tuesdays as you're going to be your home for that. And this week is going to be the FFPC main event, 12th place team owner Ryan Santos. He makes his return to the HSLD. That is Tuesday at 10/9 Central. High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network goes live at 10/9 Central on Wednesday. You can watch it on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. I encourage you to download the Better Sports Network app, both in the App Store and Google Play, so you have a chance to win all the great prizes we've been giving away there. And, of course, calling in, chatting on the platform, do live video streaming there. So that's always fun. And the 33rd Team's Josh Larkey will be my guest co-host with me this Wednesday. So that'll be fun. Play the FFPC Weekly Challenge. No draft or salary cap. Choose the 10 players in the slim format you want or the 12 players in the classic format that you want. Only one player per team. You can enter for $35. You can enter for $200. And, of course, if you want to get in that 10-team $200 entry. You'll be playing for a 2023 FFPC main event entry. So that's going to be a lot of fun. I always remind everybody to like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment on the videos, share the videos to your friends, and of course, make sure you're getting notified every time I schedule a new podcast. You will be notified. You'll know exactly when it's going to air, so you can pop aboard and join us on the show there, like Hudson Kern-Reeve and Steve Tansowny and Coco's World and all the other people we had in the YouTube chat tonight. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I really appreciate it. And of course, your weekend officially can start now.
This has been another episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by MyFFPC.com. It was broadcast live and was watched around the world. Balky and Farrell will be back next week with more analysis, more interviews, and more advice from guests much smarter than they are. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk with you again next week.
Hey, one other thing that Hudson Kern-Reeve just brought up, and I appreciate this, for many of the FFPC leagues this week, main event, football guys, etc., it is an all-play week because there is now a 12-week regular season. Week 6 is the all-play week, so you will play everybody in your league this week. The top 6 scoring teams will get wins. The bottom 6 scoring teams will get losses. So if it looks head-to-head scoring, live scoring looks a little weird this week, that's why. So you can feel free to email us at support@myffpc.com. But if you're doing that, it just proves you didn't watch this video all the way to the end, which we like to encourage. So that is what's going on in week 6. Hopefully the ball bounces your way, and we will be back at this show next Friday. But hopefully you can join us, hop aboard, drop in at 10/9 Central on Tuesday night for the High Stakes Lowdown with Ryan Santos. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate you watching.